What would you do if a little girl in torn shoes tugged your sleeve at a five-star dinner, looked up at you with tearful eyes, and begged, "Sir, please marry my mommy. She's all I've got left"? One moment shattered a billionaire's cold world, and what followed will break your heart, then heal it in ways you never imagined. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. Give this video a thumbs up, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. The rooftop lights glowed like 1,000 tiny stars above the city skyline. The soft clinking of forks against fine china and the low hum of polite laughter filled the open air. This was the kind of evening most people only saw in movies: shiny dresses, rich conversation, and the cool breeze brushing against suits that cost more than a month's rent. Dorian Vance sat at the far end of a long white linen table, a glass of untouched wine beside him, and a perfectly grilled steak growing cold on his plate. His expression was unreadable calm, sharp, the kind of look people wore when they knew they didn't need to say much to control the room. Dorian was used to power. He had built an empire from nothing, turned quiet into currency, and heartbreak into ambition. He was not the kind of man people interrupted, until someone did. A small tug on the sleeve of his coat. "Excuse me, sir," said a tiny voice, shaking just enough to crack. He looked down. A little girl no older than 4 stood beside him. Her dress was faded, a bit too big, the hem frayed. Her shoes didn't match. Her hair was messy, clinging to her cheeks where tears had dried. But it was her eyes, wide, brown, and filled with something more powerful than fear, that froze Dorian mid-motion. "Please," she said, her bottom lip trembling. "Will you marry my mommy?" The table fell silent. Forks paused. Conversations stopped. A breeze passed over them, like even the wind wasn't sure what to do. Dorian blinked. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "She's all I've got left," the little girl whispered. "She's sick, we don't have anyone. And you look like someone who could save her." Gasps rose from a few guests. A waiter stumbled trying to clear a plate nearby. But Dorian didn't notice any of that. His focus was on the girl, and the sudden, strange ache growing in his chest. Before he could speak again, a woman came rushing toward them from the far side of the patio. She was breathing hard, her blonde hair coming loose from a messy ponytail. Her coat was thin, and one of her shoes looked broken at the heel. She had the look of someone who had been running for a long time, even if her legs had only been moving for the past minute. "Maisie," she gasped, scooping the child into her arms. "Sweetheart, no, you can't just walk up to." Her voice faltered when she looked up. Their eyes met. "Lena, row." Dorian's heart dropped somewhere below the expensive tiles under his polished shoes. She looked older now, thinner, paler. The joy he remembered in her face had faded, replaced by quiet strength and tired eyes. But it was her. The same Lena who once laughed with paint-stained fingers in a college studio. The same Lena who had fallen asleep beside him while sketching stars on his shoulder with a pencil. The woman he had walked away from without a word. She recognized him too. Her lips parted in shock, but no sound came out. I'm sorry," she stammered, pulling Maisie closer. "She doesn't understand. Please forget this happened." Dorian stood slowly, his napkin falling to the floor, forgotten. "Lena? You remember," she said quietly, almost like she hoped he didn't. He started, but the words dried up. She turned to leave. "Wait," he said gently. "Are you all right?" "We're fine," she said too fast, her eyes dropping. "We don't need anything." But she was lying. He saw it in the way she leaned slightly on one leg, as if standing fully was too hard. In the dark shadows under her eyes. In the way she held her daughter like a shield and a lifeline all at once. Maisie reached out again, her small hand tugging at his jacket sleeve. "Please help her. She's scared, but she won't tell anyone." Dorian looked around. The diners were still watching. The hostess stood awkwardly, waiting for a sign. One of his assistants leaned in and whispered, "Should I have them escorted out?" He didn't answer. His gaze was on Lena, and on the girl Maisie, who looked so heartbreakingly familiar. Now that he had time to really look, "No," Dorian said firmly. "They stay." He turned to Lena. "You both look like you could use something warm. Please, just come inside." She hesitated. He could see her weighing everything: pride, fear, exhaustion. But then she nodded. Inside, in the quiet corner of the restaurant, they sat. Dorian asked nothing at first. Lena explained little. Maisie played with a spoon, resting, her cheek on her mother's arm. But Dorian couldn't stop glancing between them, at the lines on Lena's face, the curve of Maisie's nose, the way her smile mirrored someone he once knew. The questions began to rise inside him like waves. One after the other. Why hadn't she told him? Was Maisie his? And more importantly, what was he supposed to do now? Because something inside him had cracked wide open. And Dorian Vance, for the first time in years, didn't want to walk away. Dorian couldn't sleep that night. He sat by the window of his penthouse apartment, staring at the city lights below. The night buzzed with quiet traffic and distant sirens, but inside, everything felt still. Still and heavy. The image of the little girl, Maisie, wouldn't leave his mind. Her voice, her tears, the way she held onto his sleeve like he was the only person who could fix something. And then Lena. He hadn't seen her in nearly 8 years. Yet the moment their eyes met, it all came rushing back. Back then, Dorian had been a different man. Younger, not yet the polished, wealthy figure everyone respected or feared. He had been quiet, grieving the loss of his father, drifting through college like a ghost with a schedule. And Lena Rowe had been the opposite of everything he was. She was light, not just happy, but warm. Her laughter filled the spaces he used to hide in. She walked barefoot in the grass, painted even when it rained, and once told him the sky never looked the same twice. She saw beauty in things most people passed by without notice. They had met by accident, literally. She bumped into him outside the student art gallery while carrying a canvas twice her size. He caught it before it hit the ground. She had smiled like he'd saved the Mona Lisa. That was the beginning. After that, their paths kept crossing. Group projects, study rooms, cafeteria lines. Until one day, they simply stayed together. They didn't label it, didn't rush it. It just was. Lena had a way of making silence feel like music. On the nights when Dorian's sadness was too thick to speak through, she didn't push. She'd sit beside him with her sketchbook, letting her presence say everything. He never told her how much that meant, and he never told her goodbye. When a scholarship to a business program overseas came through, he told himself leaving quietly was the kindest thing. He didn't want her to follow him or wait for him. He convinced himself she'd move on quicker that way, but she didn't, and neither did he. The years passed. His career climbed. His bank account grew. But Lena's laugh lived somewhere deep in his memory, like a song he only heard in dreams. Now, she was back, real, right in front of him, and she had a daughter. A daughter with brown eyes and a soft smile, and dashes. No. Could it be? He couldn't ask. Not yet. Not like that. But the questions burned inside him. The next morning, Dorian made a call. He knew it was wrong, but he needed to know. He had contacts, people who could find information quickly, quietly. In hours. He had Lena's address and background on his desk. Her medical file was harder to get. But someone owed him a favor. He almost wished he hadn't looked. Severe heart condition, uninsured, delaying treatment. Dorian stared at the papers, hands clenched. How long had she been sick? And how had she been managing this alone? His heart ached. Without thinking, he got in his car and drove. The apartment was on a quiet street with peeling paint and crooked mailboxes. The kind of place that told 100 stories of survival and struggle. A neighbor let him in. assuming he was there to check the plumbing. Inside, the space was small but clean. A basket of laundry sat in the corner. A tiny shelf held a row of children's books. And on the table an open sketchbook that he shouldn't have looked. He knew that, but he did. Each page was filled with soft pencil drawings. Maisie's hands, her tiny shoes. A figure standing at a distance, always turned away. And notes, scattered in the margins. Thoughts, memories. Then he saw it. She looks just like him, the eyes. The frown when she's thinking too hard. But I never told him. He had already chosen his path. I chose mine. Dorian stepped back like the book had burned him. She was his. Maisie was his daughter. He had missed everything, her first steps, her first words, her favorite bedtime story. He had missed her laughter, her fears, her drawings on the wall. And Lena had faced it all alone, not because she was cruel, but because she was strong. Too strong to beg. Too proud to ask for something she thought he had walked away from for good. Dorian sat down in the chair beside the table. For the first time in years, he let himself feel it all. The regret, the shame, the sorrow. He had walked away. And now he would spend every breath trying to walk back, not just for Lena, but for the little girl with brave words and big eyes, the daughter he never knew. Days passed, but the weight in Dorian's chest didn't lift. He kept going to meetings, showing up to offices, nodding at business reports, but his mind wasn't there. It stayed with a small girl in a quiet apartment. It stayed with a woman he once loved, who now carried the burden of a life he had unknowingly helped create. Dorian had never felt more helpless, and he wasn't used to that feeling. But then, he made a decision. He would stop trying to fix things with money or apologies. He would show up with presence, with time, with effort. That was what Lena and Maisie needed now. Not a man who paid bills and disappeared again, but someone who stayed, even when things were hard. He started small. One afternoon, he returned to the neighborhood park near Lena's apartment. He didn't plan anything, he just walked, hoping maybe somehow he'd see them, and he did. Maisie was trying to ride a small, wobbly bicycle, her tongue poking from the corner of her mouth in focus. Lena sat nearby on a bench, looking pale and tired but smiling faintly every time her daughter pushed forward. Then Maisie fell. It wasn't a bad fall, just a scrape. But she burst into tears anyway. Her knee was red, her palms dusty. Before Lena could stand, Dorian was already there. "Hey," he said softly, crouching beside the girl. "That was a brave try." Maisie blinked up at him through tears. Then sniffled. "It hurts." "I know," he said. "Falling always hurts. But you know what's braver than riding a bike?" She shook her head, getting back up to try again. Maisie looked at him for a moment, then reached for his hand. From the bench, Lena didn't say anything. She watched, her eyes unreadable. Dorian helped Maisie to her feet, checked her scrape, then dusted off her sleeves. "Want me to hold this seat while you ride again?" Maisie nodded. So he did. They tried, and tried again. And finally, with a squeal of joy, she balanced on her own, riding in a wide, wobbly circle. Giggling with delight, Lena stood slowly as they returned to the bench. She didn't speak right away. Then, after a pause, she looked at Dorian. "Thank you," he nodded. "She's incredible." "She is," Lena said. Her voice was soft, tired. "You look exhausted." "I am," she admitted. "But I'm managing." Dorian didn't press. He didn't offer money. He didn't try to fix it. He just sat beside her quietly while Maisie played in the dirt nearby. That night, he left a small package on their doorstep. It wasn't flashy. Just a child-sized bike helmet, a box of colorful Band-Aids, and a bottle of vitamins. Taped to the top was a note in playful handwriting. "For the best little bike rider in town." It was signed, "A Friend." He didn't expect anything back, but a week later, as he passed the park again, he heard Maisie's voice call out, "Look, Mommy, it's Mr. Dorian." He turned to see her waving. She ran over, dragging a small paper bag in her hands. "We made cookies. Mommy says thank you." Dorian smiled and knelt to take the bag. "Well, I happen to love cookies." Maisie beamed. From a distance, Lena watched them, still quiet, still cautious, but she didn't stop the moment. She didn't pull her daughter away, and that was something. Over the next few weeks, Dorian kept showing up, not every day, not in big ways, but often enough. He brought books, helped with homework, repaired the squeaky door to their apartment when he noticed it stuck. He didn't say much to Lena, but when he did, it was always real, honest, without pressure. Then one night, everything changed. Lena had just finished her shift at the bakery. She was walking home alone, her steps slow, her paper bag of leftover rolls tucked under one arm. The streetlights flickered above. The night was warm, quiet. Then, without warning, her chest tightened. She staggered. The ground tilted. And then darkness. She collapsed near a flower shop. The owner, a kind older man, rushed out and called an ambulance. In Lena's purse was a crumpled note with one number listed under emergency contact. Dorian Vance. When the call came, he was already in his car. 20 minutes later, he was at the emergency room, heart racing, tie loosened, eyes frantic. "Where is she?" he demanded. "Lena Rowe." The nurse hesitated. "Are you family?" "I'm all she has," he said without flinching. They let him through. Lena lay in a hospital bed, pale and still, wires and monitors surrounding her. The doctor approached him, grave-faced. "Her heart's failing, fast. She needs emergency surgery. There's a possible donor match, but we need consent and payment." "I'll sign everything," Dorian said, reaching for the pen. "Just save her." Hours later, as Lena was wheeled into surgery, Maisie arrived, led by a neighbor. She clung to Dorian without hesitation. "Is Mommy going to die?" She whispered. "No," he said, holding her tight. "She's going to be okay. I promise." Maisie looked up at him with tired eyes. "She doesn't like being alone." "She's not alone," Dorian said gently. "Not anymore." And he meant it. The sun rose slowly over the city, casting soft gold across the hospital windows. Inside Lena's room, the beeping of machines blended with the quiet hum of early morning. Lena opened her eyes. The world came back in pieces, bright lights, clean sheets, a soft ache in her chest. But she was breathing, deeply, fully, for the first time in what felt like forever. She turned her head and saw Dorian. He sat in the chair beside her bed, his arms folded over the blanket, his eyes closed in sleep. He looked nothing like the cold businessman from the rooftop dinner. His hair was messy, his tie gone, his face unshaven. He looked human, tired, and maybe a little broken. But also there, when she shifted slightly, he woke up. His eyes opened, and for a moment, he didn't speak. He just looked at her like she was a miracle. "You're awake," he said softly. She nodded. "I guess I am." He leaned forward, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "The surgery went well. You're okay now." Lena blinked slowly, still trying to believe it. "How?" He gave a small smile. "You had a match, and I made sure everything was handled. You don't have to worry anymore." She stared at him. "You stayed?" "I never left," he said. "Not once." Lena's throat tightened. It wasn't just the surgery. It wasn't the money or the hospital room. It was the fact that he had chosen to stay when walking away would have been easier. A few hours later, Maisie was allowed into the room. She ran to her mother and carefully climbed onto the bed, resting her tiny head against Lena's shoulder. "You look better," she whispered. "I feel better," Lena replied. Maisie looked over at Dorian. "He stayed the whole time. He read me stories and gave me orange juice. He even let me hold his hand when I got scared." Dorian chuckled softly. She's tougher than most grown-ups I know. Maisie tilted her head. Are we going to live together now? Like a real family? Lena looked at Dorian. I want that, he said quietly. But I'll wait, for whatever pace you need. I want to be in her life, and yours, for real this time. Weeks passed. Lena recovered quickly under the care of good doctors and plenty of rest. Dorian visited every day. Sometimes with lunch, sometimes with flowers, sometimes just with his presence. He no longer tried to prove anything with money or grand gestures. He just showed up on time, with kindness and with patience. One evening, just after Lena was cleared to go home, Dorian invited them both to a small garden behind a local community art center, one Lena had once mentioned loving in college. Garden was nothing fancy. A few rows of folding chairs, some string lights overhead. But it was beautiful, peaceful, personal, and waiting near the flowers was Maisie. Wearing a pale yellow dress and holding a basket of petals. Lena stepped forward slowly, confused. What is all this? Dorian smiled. He was dressed simply, no tie, his sleeves rolled up. It's a promise. He knelt not just to Lena, but to Maisie too. He looked at the little girl and said, Maisie, would it be okay if I became your forever dad? Maisie grinned, eyes wide, and nodded without hesitation. Then he turned to Lena, his voice warm and steady. I know I left once. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I was wrong. You gave me something more precious than anything I've ever built, a family. And if you'll let me, I want to spend the rest of my life being the man you and Maisie both deserve. Lena's eyes filled with tears. She didn't need diamonds or music or crowds. She didn't need fancy speeches. All she had ever wanted was someone who stayed, and Dorian had stayed. She reached out and pulled both him and Maisie into a hug. Yes, she whispered. The small crowd of friends clapped. Maisie cheered and threw flower petals into the air like confetti. Later that night, the three of them danced under the stars. Just one song, just one moment. But it was perfect, not because it was grand, because it was real. The next morning, Maisie crawled into the middle of their little living room and announced, I drew our family. She held up a crayon drawing, 3 stick figures. One with messy hair, one with long blonde hair, and one with a flower crown. They were holding hands beneath a big sun with a smile. Lena looked at Dorian, and he smiled. Looks like we made the picture complete, he said. Maisie grinned. We're a team now. And they were, not because everything was perfect, but because they had chosen to stay, chosen to love, chosen to be there. Forever didn't have to be fancy. Sometimes it just meant showing up every single day with love in your heart and your hands open. And for Dorian, Lena, and little Maisie, that was more than enough. It was everything.